foundation setting is so important. Yep. And so many people touch the data in a home care agency. You have your marketing team, you have your scheduling team, you have your recruiting team. So everybody's kind of going in there, and you just are so focused sometimes on, getting things out the door, getting caregivers to shifts that gets lost. So really setting that foundation, making a repeatable process, identifying someone in your team that's owning a lot of it. And if you don't have that skill set, looking outside and seeing, who else could do that.
You're listening to Home Care Hindsight, the podcast where we talk with home care leaders about the big mistakes they've made and the even bigger lessons they've learned along the way. I'm David Knack, head of sales here at Zengage, and I've built a career on the idea that we learn a whole lot more from our mistakes than from our successes, which is great because I've made a lot of mistakes. I've gotten to know some of the leaders in this industry who've built amazing businesses and are super well respected. So I thought it'd be fun, instead of asking them about the great things they've accomplished, to have them tell the story of one of the biggest mistakes that they've made and how that mistake changed their thinking and the way they run their business.
All right, we are back with another episode of Home Care Hindsight, brought to you by Zengage, the leading caregiver engagement platform in home care. I'm joined today by Dana Charumbira from the Home Care CPAs. Dana, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So for people who aren't familiar with you, how would you introduce yourself?
How to introduce myself. So professionally, we are a CPA firm that supports the home care industry. We're structured, I would say, a lot like a traditional CPA firm is. So we offer bookkeeping and accounting services, billing and payroll, tax. Where I think our firm does it a little bit differently is we also have a financial planning and analysis team. So we focus a lot on financial performance, not just, what's going on in the P&L and reporting some numbers. It's understanding what are the financial statements, what's the story that they're telling us about what's going on in that agency.
Sure. This wasn't on the outline or anything, but tell me about an instance where you guys provided that FP&A service, and what did one of your clients do with that?
Yeah, there's tons that our clients do with it. So we have I would say it's somewhat structured. It is tailored to each agency and each client. So we really get to understand and know what's going on in the agencies that we're working with. And each owner in each agency has different pain points or what's top of mind for them. So a couple of examples, but probably one that I would say maybe agencies are working through right now, because we're seeing across the board agencies looking to get more into some sort of contract work or reimbursement. And one of the things that we look at is, so we break down month-on-month performance and understand what's revenue doing, what's gross margin doing, how long is it taking the agency to get paid. And when agencies are looking to get into that contract work, especially if it's a Medicaid payer, sometimes getting paid on those shifts is a little bit different than getting paid on a private pay or a VA shift. So we break down the revenue by payer source, and then we're comparing that to how quickly does it take, how long does it take them to get paid? And oftentimes we see when that new payer source is introduced, that time to get paid is longer. So agencies then run into this sort of challenge of cash flow because they see the growth and they see that coming. But if you're growing a lot and a lot of that cash is going to payroll, you start to feel this pinch. Sure. So if we can look at it and say hey, for example, it used to take you 10 days to get paid. Now it's taking you 14 and you're paying out every week. Paying out payroll every week. You need to have a week on hand of payroll cash.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times that can feel very fuzzy or uncertain because you just don't know, how much cash do I need in the bank? Yep. What should I be doing with it? So just having that concrete number for agency owners helps a lot. And then also, thinking about cash flow and where they can spend on other initiatives. If we say, based on your accounts receivable performance and then other recurring costs that you have, we think you should have 30 to 90 days of cash in the bank, depending on that owner's risk tolerance, where do they have other capital sources they can draw from. So that one simple metric can take us in a lot of different ways, and it just helps owners have that peace of mind that they know confidently, if I have this in the bank, then I don't have to kind of think every day, where is this money going to come from or what's going on?
Yeah. Well, and my experience is that this part of the business, the P&L, the financials, are the part that I think can be the scariest, but also the part that just takes it out of you. You spend an hour with your books and you're like, man, that felt like 5 hours out in the field. And so it sounds to me like that question of how much money do I have in the bank? Do I need to have in the bank? which is a really foundational one, a really fundamental one, you guys can help solve with better than just like licking a finger and putting it up and feeling which way the wind's blowing.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say for agencies that are somewhat established and their revenue is same year on year, that agency owner is close enough and knows, here's what I need. But when you're growing and it's just like coming from all different directions, it can be such this exhausting, constant mind on that, issue.
Yeah. Well, and the like untied loop of, am I missing something really obvious with my finances that's going to come back to bite me later?
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's transition to a part of the show where I ask, what kind of person are you? Sometimes I ask the question that you said, you just asked me this question. So I'm going to ask you, Dana, what kind of person are you?
So I've been described by some of my clients as a very calm or chill CPA. And I attributed that to the fact that I also do a lot of yoga, to the point where I became a certified yoga instructor in 2020, I believe that was. This feels like a long time ago now. But I do think that I don't know how many CPA yoga instructors there are, but
the middle of the diagram is minuscule.
Probably,
it's like you and like 2 or 3 other people.
We should have like a club that we join to kind of learn from each other. But for me, that piece of it, and I think there's a lot more focus now in the home care industry around work-life balance and mindfulness, and home care can be so all-consuming, and it is 24/7. I don't own an agency, but I work with a lot of owners, and as owning the business that we have, you're constantly thinking about your clients, and then you have, everything else going on in life.
Yeah.
So for me, yoga and movement and mindfulness, regulation of the nervous system has just been a great foundation to come back to. And I really think it's one of the most enjoyable, forms of movement, along with just really nice walks. So it helps, I would say, like you're saying, when you're kind of, in the books for an hour and that felt like 5, just refreshing and coming out of it. And just every time I've done a yoga class, I come out and I think it's going to be okay and we can do this. Yeah. So it's a great balance to a lot of the CPA work that we do and a lot of the situations we help our clients through.
Yeah. We need to do yoga for home care owners video.
Yeah.
We can do it. Okay, great. Well, I've brought you on here because you are a very trusted source in the industry for what is money and what do I do with it, which is where I come at this from. But a lot of course, the owners that we work with are further along in their business. They're much more sophisticated, but it sounds like you guys are a great partner for a lot of different parts of people's business life cycle. But I'm not here to ask you about any of that good stuff you've done. Instead, I want to hear about a big mistake that you've made in your career and what you learned from it.
Yeah, I think it's important because I do think most challenges or mistakes are great learning opportunities. And that's another, coming back to yoga, a great sort of mindset to have. I would say more recently, one of the things that we've been working through, so we have grown quite a bit, I would say, in the last 2 years. And part of that growth is you're growing your team, you're setting a foundation, you're setting a culture, and we are completely remote. So a lot of that is done, on video calls, and you try as best you can to get to know somebody and through their resume and what else they present. And so we were hiring for one of our first roles a couple years ago. And I had an idea, I had a job description, this is what we're looking for. But at the time, and I would say home care agency owners might feel the same way, there's so much that someone can do, right? So You want to scoop up good people when you find them.
Yeah.
So I saw a resume, I had a conversation. This person on paper was amazing. I felt grateful that they were happy to come onto our team. And I had huge expectations for what they could do. They didn't fit the exact job description that I had built, but I thought, I can hire for that. Let's just focus on getting this great person on the team right now because they're available. And what it ended up doing was creating this situation where I was still doing a lot of the work that I should have hired for. Sure. And then, I think that person was probably frustrated because I didn't have the time then to spend with them on a lot of the initiatives that I wanted to take on them to take on. Yeah. And the credentials that were presented, this was probably the biggest learning for me, was those didn't translate to on-the-job performance. So that track record was not there. And so a lot of the things that I thought I could just hand off and they would run with ended up just kind of falling back on me, or I was still doing a lot of it. So I learned a lot. From that. One was not to be starstruck by a resume or what someone tells you. And then also really, I had built that job description for a reason and I had an idea of what I wanted. And so I should have trusted myself more with just sticking with that and not kind of seeing the shiny new object that I thought would be great to bring on board. And so it didn't, I mean, we parted ways and it was okay. And one of the bigger learning experiences I had from that too was part ways when you know it's not going to work. Don't try to, like, I kept giving and kept thinking and, okay, maybe if we change this or if we do that this way.
Yeah.
But when you know it's not working, it's better, in my opinion, just to say like, thank you very much. We've tried this and it didn't work. And especially in an environment where you don't have, we're not like a large corporate. And a lot of agencies aren't a large corporation where they can have passengers, right? So you have to have everybody really pulling their weight. And if that's not the case, that's okay. It's just, recognizing that and moving on from it sooner than I did.
Yeah. You're a big systems person. What have you changed about your hiring process or the kind of interview questions that you ask to make sure that you're putting some substance behind the credentials and having a story that goes along with the resume?
That's a great question. So one of the things we started doing is testing ahead of time. So we've introduced, and we've evolved that too. So we started doing like hard skill tests. So we're accounting focused and we work a lot in QuickBooks Online. So I was doing, like, can you do these accounting journal entries and can you understand QuickBooks Online? And we use QuickBooks Online in a very advanced way, especially with like a lot of integrations that we do for our clients.
Sure.
So those tests didn't really give us a good indicator of that person's performance. So then we evolved from that. And I said, what, really the question we have here is, can this person like think critically and can they be proactive? That's hard to test for. But we started introducing tests that were more situational, that gave us a better understanding of like, if somebody had this data, what would they do with it and how would they work with it? And because we're remote, there was a piece of that skill set assessment where they did like a quick, 1 minute answer to 9 different questions.
Yeah.
So for me, we don't have tons of spare time. So that was a great way also just to see like, how do they present themselves on camera and how would they come across? And so we were able to really narrow down that list of candidates and I think come up with a very different list of candidates just by doing some pre-screening.
Yeah.
And then also getting more people involved in the interview process. So at the time when I did the hire, it was me and, I was really just looking for somebody. So now that we have a bigger team, I have different voices and they look at things so different. And it's just, I think it's wonderful to have those different aspects because I probably would have discounted somebody that had a great chance just because, I looked at their resume one way and they look at it differently. So those are the changes we made. And I really feel, we've also done a different onboarding process with our team and we built a lot of tools that they can use. So for me, treating our employees as well as we treat our clients is really important because they're the voice of your company and they're the ones going out and doing a lot of the work behind the scenes. So it was a great learning experience for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that every new hire is not just somebody to come in and do the set of tasks and accomplish the job description. But we're small enough and you guys are small enough that every employee is a representation of your brand. For the listeners of this show, either for, your clients and your referral sources, or for your caregivers and all of the other internal stakeholders that you have. And so it's super important to find somebody who's not just able to do the stuff or has a resume that says they can do the stuff, but instead to be able to, embody the kind of mission of the company. Because at the end of the day, this is a people business. You've got to care about what you do to be successful in home care, I think. And, finding people who are able to check the box in the skill set, but also, have the right kinds of character traits to be able to handle stuff with patience and with critical thinking and all the stuff that's hard to do and really hard to screen for in the interview process.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I want to transition now and ask you about something that is really underrated in the industry. You think it's really important, more people should pay attention to it, but it's generally something that's overlooked or put on the back burner.
That's a good one. I think it's talked about a lot, but maybe underrated in its importance are metrics for agency owners. And I think they're underutilized a lot because they seem time consuming and overwhelming to put together.
Yeah.
And that goes back to sort of what I touched on earlier, with agencies evolving and growing and cash flow is if you have that day sales outstanding metric, you can start to plan around it and get some comfort around it. And there's so many different metrics that an agency can measure. So I think they're underrated and underutilized for a few reasons. They're overwhelming to understand like what to measure, because you can have 100 metrics. And if you're looking at 100 metrics, you're never going to really probably move the needle on any of them. And then they're also time consuming potentially to put together. So a lot of the times I think agencies sometimes are kind of flying blind and they're doing what they know and they might be missing opportunities because of that. So how we solution for that, or what we recommend, is really going into like their processes and understanding where is data coming from. You even take a step back, like how is it going into a system? So we work a lot when we first start with an agency on their setup of their client management system and then their accounting system and their payroll system, because they all come together and have a lot of valuable information in them. And then we can, if it's set up correctly and everything's going in correctly, then we're able to like do, a lot of analysis and understanding what's going on. But a lot of times just that initial phase of foundation setting is so important. Yep. And so many people touch the data in a home care agency. You have your marketing team, you have your scheduling team, you have your recruiting team. So everybody's kind of going in there and you just are so focused sometimes on, getting things out the door, getting caregivers to shifts that gets lost. So really setting that foundation, making a repeatable process. So, this identifying someone in your team that's owning a lot of it. And if you don't have that skill set, looking outside and seeing, who else could do that. Because once you have that foundation, that repeatable process, and you've identified what metrics are important for your agency's trajectory or strategic plan, then you're able to, focus on whatever that list of metrics is. And then maybe you have different metrics for different team members that they're looking at. For me anyway, it's really relevant when they're timely. So if you're looking at metrics 3 months from now from 3 months ago, it's not really going to add much value. So that repeatable, timely process is essential. And it sounds overwhelming, but if you break it down, I really think agencies can have, something that they're looking at in a 60 to 90 day period, and then they're repeating that month on month.
So, when I talk to somebody like friend of the show, Rachel Gartner, she's going to have some really important metrics for your recruiting funnel and how healthy that is. When I talk to somebody who's a marketer or a salesperson within home care, like a Sarah Barker, friend of the show, then she's going to have a different set of metrics that salespeople should be hitting. Whoever is owning kind of the financial health of the business, what are, if let's imagine they're not really measuring anything in a disciplined, regimented way today. What's the first step? Like what's the low hanging fruit that if they did this, it would move the needle by, 50% or whatever?
Really, I think looking just at your gross margin and your return on sales, your net operating income, those are just, gross margin is really telling because it helps in a lot of ways. And I would say you can take it a step further very easily in looking at your average price per hour and your average pay rate per hour. So when I see a gross margin fluctuate, that's where I immediately look. Okay, was it a price per hour? Was it a pay rate per hour shift? If it's either of those two, then we're going to dig into like, was workers' comp changed, or did you have a once-off or something else going on that we need to be aware of? But I would say those three, so gross margin, average price per hour, average pay rate per hour are big. And then we look at like performance by hours as a shift, but that goes into your price per hour and your pay rate per hour. And I wouldn't overwhelm it. I think DSO is a big number to have a good handle on. So probably those four. I'm trying to run through to think of what else we look at.
Tell me what DSO is.
So DSO is day sales outstanding, and that is basically your receivables divided by your revenue. So if you're 7 day sales outstanding, you have 1 week of invoicing outstanding at any point in time. We see if it's a purely private pay agency, that should be close to zero because you should be invoicing and collecting payment, pretty much real time if you're using EFT or credit card processing.
Sure.
If it's a different mix, anything under 10 is pretty healthy. I would say you really just the goal would be to eliminate a cash flow pain, is if you're measuring it against your pay cycle. So if you're paying weekly payroll, you want your DSO to be 7 or less because that means you're getting paid before you're paying out. If you're doing biweekly, you want it to be 14.
That's super helpful. Let's transition to talking about a little mistake that you see home care owners make all the time. And if they quit, it'd make their lives or their businesses like 10 times better.
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like I'm harping on cash flow a lot, which we don't actually, we don't measure to that in a lot, but I would say we see a lot of owners managing just to cash flow. So like, do I have enough to make payroll this week or next week? And that works for a while until it doesn't, because if you're only keeping an eye on what's in the bank, you're kind of ignoring, everything else going on behind the scenes. And so a lot of times what's in the bank is a translation of the processes that are going into getting that money there. So, your billing process, how's your client intake? Are you having the conversation that says, hey, we need, a deposit, we need to get an EFT form signed? Are you having those conversations with the clients so that they're aware of like how you're going to bill and collect? If you're getting into contract work, are you thoroughly interrogating, does that make sense with what I can cash flow? Are they going to pay me? What do I need to do to get paid by that? And a lot of the times, agencies operate in this cash flow crisis mode where they're just making sure that, hey, we got to move money into the bank account because we're going to make payroll. And then once you get in that cycle, it's hard to get out of it because things get lost and they get missed. So as much as we are an accounting firm looking at a profit and loss, everything that goes into that, those processes associated are so important because that's really what's going to be building that information that we're going to use.
Yeah. I think as you did touch on the kind of contract work, that touches on something you previously discussed, which is gross margin. But that also touches on, I think this is something a lot of agencies are thinking about. Medicaid has gotten to be less onerous to work with and more of kind of like, it seems like in a lot of areas that bill rates for Medicaid are going up, but also the VA has become a really important partner for a whole lot of folks in the home care space. And so one of the things I'm hearing you say is if you're thinking about getting into that kind of contract work or increasing the amount of your business that's in that contract work, one thing to expect is that days sales outstanding, the amount of time you're waiting on cash to come in, is probably going to go up. And it would be a good idea to adjust how much money you need to keep on hand in the bank to make sure that you're not feeling this kind of crisis moment around payroll.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
What's kind of the exercise that people should go through as they're thinking about taking on contract work with an eye to gross margin? Because that's a super important metric. But, if you can keep a Medicaid client for, twice as long as you could keep a private pay client, how are you thinking through kind of lifetime value of a client over and against the gross margin associated with that client?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have seen more agencies thinking about getting into Medicaid as a payer source because the volumes are there. And so what we say is I would evaluate that contract on an individual basis. So what's the gross margin, just purely standalone? Mm-hmm. And then if we bring that into your mix, let's say we're making it very simple, like 100% private pay, and we want to bring that into the mix, and we forecast that out, what's your combined gross margin going to be? And it really varies. Like each local sort of Medicaid situation is going to be different. Maybe the marketing efforts are different, so you don't have to invest as much on that piece of it. So your return on that could be better. If it meets a gross margin threshold, which we typically, I would say between like 30 and 35%. Sometimes if it's lower than that, it just consumes so many resources that it's really hard to make it viable. Then you just have to keep hiring office staff to support the scheduling and the recruiting. Or if you can figure out like a family caregiver situation, that could be an exception. So yeah, evaluate it on a standalone, and then just, it sounds when someone says like model it out or forecast it out, just a very simple calculation around like if we had this, 10, 25% of our business, what would that look like from a gross margin perspective? And then what would the payroll associated with that be? And are we comfortable with having that float for, 30, 60, 90 days? And what does that look like? Sure. So a lot of times agencies walk in and they see the hours, and then, it's great because revenue is going up, and it's like, oh my gosh, where's all my cash? And then that's when it starts to click. So that would be what I would look at to begin with.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And you spoke a lot about cash flow, but that is like, when you look at reasons that small businesses don't make it or have significant hardship, it's the number one reason is businesses don't have an exit plan. And that intergenerational transfer of the business or being able to sell it or whatever doesn't go well. And so there's no place for the business to go, and the owner is no longer interested in running the business. And, probably the number two reason is issues around cash flow. So appreciate the work that you guys do to make this much less stressful and kind of demystify pieces of that part. We've talked about a lot of mistakes people have made. I like to end every episode, though, asking about something that's happened lately in your business that you're proud of. So what's your recent win, your win of the week, I'll call it?
Yeah, so we have focused a lot on, so I would say last year when I talked, I spoke about our employee onboarding and our recruitment. That was a great win we had then. Recently, though, we've really, as we've grown, sometimes companies can stumble with their current clients, or they might have a clunky onboarding process for their new clients. So we've started to lean a lot on like workflows to support new clients coming in, and really just transferring your financials to a company can be just you're there. We see a lot, we sometimes see more than family members see of what's going on in someone's life. So it's a big step to hand that over. And so appreciating that and making a client feel comfortable with what we're doing and asking questions, because we get into a lot of different systems and see a lot of different things. So a very handheld process through that, with a combination of automation and workflows, and then also just a lot of touch points, email communication, kickoff calls, getting all of those in place. And then hand in hand with that is just the service delivery. So we've invested a lot in technology. I would say we're a completely remote firm, and I was reflecting on this. We don't pay rent, but what we don't pay in rent, we invest in software to just make it easier and better for everybody. So we recently rolled out 2 softwares internally that have just completely improved the timeliness, the interaction, and the turnaround time. And I'm plugged into, there's an accounting community with an accounting influencer, if you can believe that exists. He's big on social media and really talks a lot about what progressive firms are doing. And we plug into that just to keep up with what's happening. So I like to think our client experience is different than a traditional CPA firm with some of the response times and turnaround times, and really just keeping both our employees and our clients top of mind, because they go hand in hand, and investing in technology and workflows and systems to support that has been a great accomplishment. An exhausting 2024, but I think for 2025, we're excited to see that really roll out.
Yeah, that's great. We know this is a small industry. Word gets around. Something that we've really invested a lot into is being really obsessed with our customers, making sure that they know that they are a huge priority to us. All the good stuff we've learned about and put into our product is from our customers telling us what to do. And so that commitment to excellent levels of service and responsiveness and stuff is we've seen something that this market and these, home care owners really respond well to, and we'll share about you. So good to hear that you guys have made that investment. I know it can be really frustrating when you're reaching out to somebody you trust with a big part of your business, and the response time is less than desirable. So that's great. Before we get off here today, what do you want to plug? Where can people find you?
I think the best way to talk to us is on our website. You can book a discovery call. I've had a few of them this week already, and it's just really cool to talk to owners and just hear what's going on. There's just so much happening, and you were talking about business transitions and new owners stepping in and sale of business, and there's just exciting things. And I love talking to owners, and I would say we give a lot of free advice on the calls, which is kind of against industry guidance, but really we're here to help. We really think of us as a long-term partner to what's going on in an agency. So that discovery call, we're already starting to collect information to get to know what's going on. Great conversation. I learn, I get to know people. So I really enjoy those.
Yeah, well, great. Well, Dana, thanks so much for making the time to come on the show today.
Yeah, thanks, David. This was really fun. It was great chatting with you, and excited to see what Zengage is up to in 2025.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy year for sure.
On behalf of the team here at Zengage, thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back next week with another episode, so be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. Leave us a rating while you're there. It helps other people find the show. If you have comments on the show, drop me a line, david@zengage.com. Would love to hear from you, chat with you there.